Leonard Nimoy opened up about Star Trek and the unusual way he created the Vulcan nerve pinch.
But before we start, please take a moment to give this video a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll never miss these great stories.
Pointed ears, slanted eyebrows, a notably dispassionate demeanor. We must be talking about the Vulcans. Yes, these iconic Star Trek characters are instantly recognizable, but not only for their quirky appearance. Any Trekkie worth their salt knows all about the Vulcans' famous nerve pinch. But why was this move invented in the first place? Well, that's all down to the man who played the most famous Vulcan of them all, Leonard Nimoy. And as the actor revealed in a strikingly candid interview, he had a surprising personal reason for coming up with it. Nimoy gave an extensive 4-hour interview to the Archive of American Television in the year 2000. He spoke about his beginnings in Boston all the way up to life as a famous actor. Yet for all the hardcore Trekkies out there, the most interesting part of all was about Nimoy's contributions to Spock's character. During the chat, Nimoy looked back on the early days of Star Trek and tried to pinpoint the moment when Spock really came to life. Thanks to Nimoy's direct input, Spock is now undoubtedly one of the most iconic characters in television history. After all, you'd really struggle to find anybody who doesn't instantly recognize the Vulcan at a glance. Nimoy's portrayal is legendary, and his contributions to the character's backstory and psychology can't be overstated. Spock and his fellow Vulcans are fascinating television creations. They're aliens which are quite like humans but different in crucial ways. The species have pointy ears and blood composed of copper, but the most notable characteristic is perhaps the way they act. Vulcans are dedicated to logic and act in ways that try to keep a lid on their emotions. Spock is the most famous Vulcan of Star Trek lore, of course, but he's actually half human. His mother was a woman named Amanda Grayson and he had a Vulcan father named Sarek. The tension between these two sides of Spock's heritage is a fascinating part of the show in its own right. Spock was the brainchild of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry, though many writers have worked on him over the years. Of course, he is completely bound to the man who first portrayed him all those decades ago. Leonard Nimoy molded Spock into the character we all know today, and without him it just wouldn't have been the same. It can take actors a little while to fully get to grips with their character as a show is starting out. But things really started to click into place quite quickly for Nimoy. In fact, there was one very early Star Trek scene that he credited with helping to define Spock and his eccentricities. Nimoy recalled what happened during that early shoot in his conversation with the Archive of American Television. Speaking of a specific scene, he said, "Spock had one word to say and the word was, fascinating. And we're looking at this thing on the screen and I got caught up in that energy and I said, fascinating." Though Nimoy's delivery of the word, fascinating, had apparently been a bit too emphatic for the episode's director. The Spock actor said, "He gave me a brilliant note which said, be different. Be the scientist. Be detached. See it as something that's a curiosity rather than a threat." I said, "Fascinating." Well, a big chunk of the character was born right there. This deadpan utterance of fascinating was far more appropriate. Aside from figuring out this more withdrawn manner of acting as Spock, Nimoy drew from his personal life for his portrayal. His Jewish heritage was a particular source of inspiration for the actor, with evidence of it seen all throughout his personal life. But even Nimoy's character in Star Trek was greatly influenced by this side of his life. The most important Jewish influence that can be seen in Spock and Star Trek is the famous Vulcan hand gesture. For many people, this is instantly recognizable as the way in which Vulcans greet one another. But the Jewish community might note the act's similarity to a gesture within their own culture. The gesture first appeared in Star Trek during the second season's first episode, which is called Amok Time. The script for this episode indicated that Spock was going to meet another Vulcan, something we'd never seen on the show before. This got Nimoy thinking about the various ways that human cultures say hello to one another. Nimoy believed that Vulcans would have a special greeting, just like many human cultures shake hands to say hello. So, he had an idea, and it came directly from his own heritage. And with Gene Roddenberry's support, the actor was allowed to go with it. Speaking of the gesture, Nimoy told the Archive of American Television, "That came from my Jewish background. It's a gesture that's used within the priestly benediction during Jewish services in synagogues. The Kohanim, who are priests, bless the congregation, and when they do, they use this gesture, which is the shape of the letter Shin in the Hebrew alphabet." So, this gesture was something that Nimoy was familiar with because of his Jewish background. But not everybody in Star Trek managed to perform the sign with ease. Apparently, there are rumors that some actors had to wrap their fingers with tape in order to get the desired shape. The Vulcan hand gesture is inextricably tied to those most famous of words, live long and prosper. But although these were made famous by Nimoy, the actor can't actually take credit for writing them. That honor belongs to Theodore Sturgeon, who came up with the script for the Amok Time episode. The Vulcan hand gesture and the accompanying greeting are now undeniably legendary parts of pop culture. Though the Vulcans have plenty of other quirks and abilities that make them so interesting within the Star Trek universe. Among the best things, it's fair to say, is the fabled mind meld. The mind meld essentially allows Vulcans to merge their minds into someone else's. It involves them placing their fingertips onto the head of another sentient creature. With that, a sort of telepathic connection between the two individuals is formed, and they can communicate without words. According to Nimoy, the person who came up with the Vulcan mind meld was Star Trek creator Roddenberry. He claimed that the creator had imagined it in order to spice up a particular scene he was working on. Though the true genesis of the mind meld is subject to dispute, as some have suggested it came from writer Shimon Winselberg. Regardless of who created it, the mind meld is yet another memorable feature of the Vulcan species. And it's definitely one of the Vulcan abilities most beloved among Star Trek fans. Yet there's another skill that might just be the most exciting. We're talking, of course, about the legendary Vulcan nerve pinch. The Vulcan nerve pinch is an incredibly effective means of overcoming an opponent in Star Trek. How does the technique work, though? Well, it's when someone places a hand on another person's shoulder and causes them to lose consciousness. Such a calm and measured move always stood in stark contrast to Captain Kirk's more gung-ho approach. The nerve pinch is the perfect move for Vulcans, as it suits their manner and culture. You might think, then, that it was a meticulously written move that some writer gave a great deal of thought to. The truth, however, is that the idea's origins were actually a lot more spontaneous than that. The nerve pinch showed up for the first time in an episode from the first season called The Enemy Within. The technique quickly came to be a fan favorite and has been seen many times over the decades since it was first utilized by Spock. The nerve pinch is even in the ongoing Star Trek Discovery series. But back in that Season 1 show, The Enemy Within, such a novel move was necessary because of a disaster that engulfed the crew of the Enterprise. During the episode, a faulty transporter divides Kirk into two separate individuals. One's evil, the other is good, and Spock needs to overcome the former. But how is he going to do this? The original script intended for Spock to smash the wicked Kirk over the head with his phaser. Though Nimoy disagreed with this course of action, as he believed that it was far too primitive a move for a Vulcan to perform. Thankfully, the actor had a solution. Nimoy recalled to the Archive of American Television, "We were doing an episode where Kirk was split into two characters. It was a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story. Malfunction in the transporter splits him into two personalities, the evil side and the good side. There was a confrontation between the evil and the good Kirk in one scene, and the evil Kirk has the weapon and they're saying to the good Kirk, 'I don't need you, I don't need you.' And we're in danger that the good Kirk is going to be killed and Kirk would never be the same after that." Nimoy went on, "So I suggested to the director that I have this special capability of putting some energy into the human anatomy that would render a guy unconscious. And he said, well, let's see what it would look like. I explained to Shatner what I was going to do, and I came up behind him, and I put my hand on his neck." With that on-the-fly decision during filming, Nimoy had created a legendary move that would be remembered for generations to come. After he touched Shatner on the shoulder, Nimoy recalled, "He froze up like that and dropped to the floor and the Vulcan neck pinch was born. And I was out of fighting. All I had to do was reach out and knock people out with the neck pinch." The Vulcan neck pinch is a perfect fighting move for Spock and his kind, as it illustrates the species' restrained nature. The technique also indicates that they understand more about biology than human beings. Though despite all this, Nimoy actually came up with the move for a much more personal reason.